Hi there.
Hi,
What's your name?
my name is Michael Croft.
And Michael, what do you do?
I make automata.
And you're a retired teacher also, right?
I am at the University of Arizona.
Yeah. And what did you teach?
I taught jewelry and metalsmithing for 30 years.
And what made you interested in automata in the first place?
I discovered it, like many people did, on a trip to England to the Cabaret Mechanical Theater, where I was intrigued. I didn't start making it at that time, but that's when I first developed my interest in automata.
And what were some of the early makers that you identified as being people you'd like to follow?
Well, people like Paul Spooner and his partner Matt Smith, as well as Keith Newstead, Peter Markey, the usual cast of criminals.
Yeah. And what intrigued you, and where was the interface between what you were doing as a metalsmith and what they were doing?
I don't know that there was that much of an interface. I mean, I was intrigued simply by the mechanics and occasionally by their use of the metal, particularly that of Keith Newstead, who at that time was using a great deal of brass in his works. But I was just simply enchanted by the humor and by the mechanics and the movement. And I didn't start making it for quite some time because I didn't have the mechanical skills. So I started buying a lot of those kits that you used to be able to get very cheaply from CMT, made by Timber Kits, and putting them together, such as the ones you see behind me, just to learn the mechanics, learn what a cam would do and what it wouldn't do, what was the difference between an elliptical cam and a snail cam, and just all of those sorts of things which I had no background or training in at all.
And so if you would suggest to somebody if they wanted to try to make some of their own work, how would they go about it?
I think that's a good way to start, because you do need some basic rudimentary understanding of simple mechanics and how to convert rotary motion into reciprocal motion or linear motion.
And what was the first piece you bought?
The first piece I bought was a small piece by John Lumbus called Fishy Stories. And it was based on the notion of Pinocchio. And so this fisherman was showing you how big his fish was, and when the fish got bigger, his nose got longer. And I bought that at the same time I bought a piece called The Last Dodo, which was a very complex piece by Paul Smith. Paul Spooner and Matt Smith.
Right. And so you, what were some of the first pieces you made again?
First piece I made was a piece called the Flasher, and it's a very, very simple mechanism. Hopefully it has a surprise for most people, because you're expecting to see one thing and you see something altogether different. So.
And you like the ones that have a narrative to them?
I do. Not a lot of them do. Some of them are just simple repetitive actions, and some of them have a sort of action to a conclusion. As Paul says, kind of like a joke, where you have the setup and then you have the payoff. And then the ones which actually tell a small story are the ones that I really gravitate towards. The pieces by Neil Hardy, who does that a lot in his work.
And what are some of the most obscure makers that you have that you feel people may not know about?
I don't know how many people would be familiar with Jan Zalud, who's a Czech artist. His work I admire very much. Jan is a puppet maker by profession, but he makes automata now and again. Pierre Mayer, who is a Frenchman, who's a magician, and almost all of his works are of other magicians or of magic acts. John Morgan, who's an American who teaches at Auburn University, does beautiful, beautiful pieces, sometimes very complex, but always gorgeously painted.
And why do you think there aren't as many American makers as there are Brits?
Well, we don't have any tradition. America has no tradition in automata. It was almost exclusively a European tradition. It flourished in the 1700s when we were busy trying to make a country, and so we never adopted that whole notion of extravagant toys for adults, which is what the French pieces pretty much are. And it all disappeared by the end of the First World War, so there was just no opportunity for American audiences to become familiar with
I guess we have
automata.
whirligigs.
We have whirligigs, which is certainly on the same manner, same notion rather.
But they are not as complex for sure.
No. But I'm not sure that they always have to be very complex. I have a number of pieces which I'm very fond of, which are really quite simple.
Mm-hmm. Well, great. Well, it's been a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for showing me your collection.
You're
Appreciate
most
it.
welcome.